It's time for 515 Fantasy Football.
I know football. Are you ready for some football?
Domination on Sundays begins with listening to these guys on Thursdays.
You ready for this?
Over 40 years of fantasy football experience between them.
Yeah!
One is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, husband and father, entering his 18th year of fantasy competition. Brian Eikenberry. The other, also a proud husband and father, is one of the winningest fantasy minds in the state, celebrating 24 years of excellence. Andy Hall.
Let's get the game on!
It's showtime. The 515 Fantasy Football Show with your hosts, Andy Hall and Brian Eikenberry.
The road to a fantasy championship begins right here, right now. Welcome, friends, to the second season of the 515 Fantasy Football Show. Andy Hall joined, as always, by Mr. Brian Eikenberry. Between us, over 40 years of fantasy experience, countless opponents bested, numerous trophies adorn our mantles, and because of you, we've been rewarded with a second hour of the show, heard weekly on 1350 ESPN Radio in Des Moines. Of course, we're also available on iTunes and Stitcher, among other places. But as always, we'll invite you to check us out online at espndesmoines.com and on Facebook and Twitter at 515 Fantasy. Can't tell I'm excited, can you, Brian? I haven't shut up enough to let you say your piece. My apologies.
Hey, I'm still here, so that's cool. I'm very happy to still be here. Thank you, listeners, for that second hour. We couldn't have done it without you, and that's what's really important here. Is the reason we do it, and it's for you. So thank you.
Couldn't be more excited that it's that time of year again. It's the month of August, Brian. Training camps are open. Preseason is about to begin.
Oh, finally. And now we're drafting, and we're talking about dynasty drafts and rookie drafts and all this stuff, and it's finally real. It's here. You can taste it. Your mock drafts are happening. You don't feel like a total loser because you're doing mock drafts on the first week of June.
My wife is so annoyed with me, by the way.
I've found out that you can do a lot of mock drafts now through your phone, so I kind of do mine incognito and kind of underneath the table kind of stuff.
She knew nothing about football before she met me. Now she looks at me from like across the room and goes, "You're not doing another of those stupid mock drafts, are you?"
No, I'm not. I'm playing Candy Crush or Pokemon Go now.
Yeah, which game are you playing, dear?
Yeah.
We've got a lot of ground to cover over these next couple of hours. Brian and I will go over each of the major positions and discuss current ADPs for several players. We'll talk draft strategy a little later. The ever-popular pop quiz is back this year, much to the chagrin of Mr. Brian.
Thank goodness. I've been looking forward to it. I haven't been yelled at for a while.
And we'll also have a conversation about the art of the snipe and let you know what that's all about as well on this first show of the new season. But first things first, I always like to begin with some headlines of fantasy note. Beginning in your favorite city in the U.S., could it be Detroit, Michigan, Brian?
It could be.
Where we are talking free agent signing Anquan Bolden, who initially, I don't know how you felt about this, but I didn't think it was all that big a deal.
I thought it was a big deal only because the value it's going to bring to the players around him. And when I learned of his position where he's going to be lining up, I was definitely confused. It wasn't where I seen him playing.
The Lions website expects Anquan Bolden to, quote, step into the slot in Detroit. Now, Golden Tate ran the majority of his 2015 routes in the slot. He finished with a career-low 9 yards per catch, which is not good. Bolden's addition here suggests Tate will, run on the perimeter, and that's good news for Tate with his speed and breakaway ability.
And plus, you get to send the old man across the middle to get hurt and not somebody you've invested a lot of money in.
Nobody moves the sticks like Anquan Bolden does.
You got those hands, you got those hands.
Do you remember a few years back when he broke his face?
I don't know if I do or not.
So he caught a ball over the middle for a touchdown, and I think he was with Arizona at the time still. So this is before he was with Baltimore. And he caught a ball over the middle and took like a huge shot. You've seen Jerry Maguire, right?
Was that? Did he get it under the chin?
He got it right in the face.
I don't remember this at all.
So it was a hit very close to what you saw in the movie Jerry Maguire that took out Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character.
That was like 25 years ago.
We come to find out later that Anquan Bolden is a tough character. He broke his face. in that one.
Well, now he's in the Motor City.
I'm still not targeting him in drafts, but I will say that good news for the Lions organization, and particularly if you're a Golden Tate owner, this probably affects you more than anybody. Moving on to a question mark. Quarterback Nick Foles, who is currently not on a team.
He will be.
But it sounds like, Brian, it could be one of two places right now, Dallas or Kansas City. What's your take?
I think it has to be Dallas just because of Tony Romo's injury history. They could have done so much last year if they would have had a competent backup quarterback. And Nick Foles is a competent backup quarterback, so he can at least help you win games. And I think that pressure's on Jerry Jones to make that sign.
The backup quarterback in Dallas, by the way, is out for the season. Believe it was a broken ankle, if I'm not mistaken. And with Tony Romo's injury history, probably smart they look into bringing somebody in, and that somebody could be Nick Foles. Although, looks like Coach Andy Reid in Kansas City wants to give Dallas a little bit of competition here for Mr. Foles' services. Reid drafted Foles in the third round in Philadelphia, and the Chiefs never did replace Chase Daniels. So it could be a case where Foles ends up in Kansas City as the backup to Alex Smith, maybe even competing for the starting role there. What do you think?
I don't think anybody's taken away from Alex Smith. He's proven his worth. He gets the job done. It's just enough to not lose the game, but Nick Foles loses a lot of games.
Of course, we're keeping our close eye on a lot of the rookies that were drafted here in 2015 and 2016, Brian. Josh Dachson is a new wide receiver for the Washington Redskins, dealing with an Achilles injury right now, but the team has informed the media that it looks like he is not expected to miss more than a couple of weeks. But, he's a guy that certainly, if you're in a dynasty draft, you'll be taking in the first round.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always kind of stinks to see those young guys get those big-time injuries, but when news broke, it's definitely not as bad as what it first seemed.
On to Pittsburgh. Sammy Coates has been a regular with the first-team offense so far at Steelers training camp. And, when suspension happened to Martavis Bryant, and that was a big blow to the fantasy community because we had a lot of hope for him in the season this year. But Sammy Coates stepping in, not Marcus Wheaton. What do you think?
I like it, but it's just one of those things where are you comfortable with drafting a Steeler not named Antonio Brown in these situations? Because we've seen this happen numerous times, whether it's injuries or drug abuse or whatever. It's kind of a scary situation.
I'm going to look at it like I look at the Dallas situation. Dez Bryant is, of course, the money man there, but look at what Terrence Williams and a couple of other of their receivers have been able to do. They've been nice fill-in type players that you can draft in the double-digit rounds and actually end up performing for your team if need be. I look at Sammy Coates, he's got that kind of potential. We know what Marcus Wheaton is, and frankly, he's not all that exciting.
I agree. There's nobody on the Steelers roster outside of 2-3 individuals that are getting drafted by me.
The Titans deal with Andre Johnson contains no guaranteed money. What this means is they're bringing the guy in, see if he's got anything left in the tank. I think that question was answered last year in Indianapolis, don't you?
Yeah, it's just kind of they're bringing him in just in case, just to see if maybe he had some PED use in the offseason, I'm guessing.
In Oakland, Amari Cooper has started rooming with quarterback Derek Carr to build some chemistry.
Well, that's pretty good because Amari Cooper is one of those guys where I know in some keeper leagues he is being kept and he is being targeted often and early.
That should be another nice season for both him and for Michael Crabtree, who you can get much later in drafts. I actually think Crabtree might be the better value if you're drafting Oakland wide receivers.
Crabtree was one of my biggest regrets from last year as I drafted him extremely late, last round or two in most of my drafts, and then dropped him at like week 2, only to have him picked up by somebody else. So that's a burner.
Bit of a scare in Dallas with Ezekiel Elliott, who's been dealing with some hamstring issues. We will talk more at length about Mr. Elliott and the Dallas backfield when we get to running down the running back position, Brian. But overall, it sounds like he's dealing with just a little bit of soreness, and it's not too major, but that's something that people are watching Ezekiel Elliott closer than they're watching just about anybody, and he's a rookie.
Well, and that's because he's expected to be a big deal. He's expected to be the next AP. If there is another AP, it's going to be him. But it's not wavering me off of any kind of draft position.
Remember Austin Seferian-Jenkins?
ASJ.
Tampa Bay tight end who went gangbusters the first couple weeks of the season last year and then completely disappeared and did nothing afterwards. Well, now he's fighting for his job in Tampa. Coach Dirk Cutter has informed the media that at present, Cameron Brate is the starting tight end running with the ones in Tampa.
You have to wonder if that's more attitude or skill.
Folks, we invite you to stick around. There's plenty still to come. The 515 Fantasy Football Show. Coming up here in just a bit, we're going to compare quarterbacks, look at all those ADPs, and Brian and I will break down our lists. Admittedly a bit early, but that is what we've got coming for you next here on 1350 ESPN Radio. Welcome back. It is the 515 Fantasy Football Show. Andy Hall joined by Brian Eikenberry. We've been through the news and notes, Brian. Now it's time to break down quarterbacks. An interesting topic because if you're anything like me, Brian, you love to wait on quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's one of those old habits that die hard. You look at fantasy football years and years ago. I mean, you were pulling triggers on quarterbacks and running backs in those first few rounds. But now there's just as much value as waiting to round 7, 8 than there is jumping on a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers in rounds 1 and 2.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. You and I both have done early positional rankings for all the major positions, including quarterback. And mine have changed a bit. I don't know if you've noticed, but at the top of my list right now sits one Andrew Luck from Indianapolis.
Yeah, I can't do it. I can't pull it on Luck. While he has been good, for me, it's his supporting cast and his line and everything else that goes on. I'm not saying it can happen. I'm just saying that there's a lot more low-hanging fruit on that tree before Andrew Luck.
Well, conventional wisdom would have you believe that Cam Newton is the unquestioned number one at the quarterback position. Would you disagree with that?
I indeed would disagree with Cam Newton being number one now, because I know I didn't update this on the web, but I do feel that for me, I think Aaron Rodgers is moving into that spot. The more I watch training camps, the more people are healthy, the more people are doing. As much as a Lion fan hates to admit it, A-Rod is back, and they're at full strength, and it's going to be just gross.
But not 100%, because if you haven't heard, Jordy Nelson is dealing with some issues regarding his other knee. This is not the one that caused him to miss all of 2015. He's got some issues with the other knee now. Nothing that's going to keep him out for the entire year yet, but he is taking some time off of the practice field. And I tell you something, man, I think we learned a lot about that Packers offense last year. I don't think Randall Cobb is a number one in that offense. We saw what happened to Aaron Rodgers when he lost his number one target, Jordy Nelson, for the entire season. He never really recovered. And anyway, I'm going to make the argument against Aaron Rodgers here as a Vikings fan, big surprise. But my argument against him, and believe me, he's still in my top three, but he throws a ton of touchdowns. So this guy is accurate, and efficient, but he doesn't throw for a ton of yards, generally speaking.
Well, so you got to think McCarthy has learned his lesson. You've got to think they have really implemented a disaster plan after what happened last year and the way people were able to defend them, and just them having to change their playbook so much and alter their game plan so much. You would think that there is some sort of disaster plan in place, and lots of people take time off during practice and preseason and all that stuff. I would be stunned if Jordy Nelson actually played in a preseason game this year, just because even Aaron Rodgers calls them meaningless games and he hates playing them. So I'd be surprised if they were even on the field together during the preseason.
Here's the argument for Rodgers. Despite all the troubles of 2015, he still finished as the number 7 quarterback in fantasy football in standard leagues.
Yeah, and his relationship with Olivia Munn has moved out of that, the beginning phase, so hopefully we're over that hump, and everything's going to work out just fine.
I don't think that's the drama anymore with Aaron Rodgers. My wife, aforementioned wife, watches this Bachelorette show, or Bachelor, is it, or Bachelorette? I can't remember which one. But anyway, apparently it was Aaron Rodgers' brother, and apparently there's all kinds of strife within the Rodgers family. I'm surprised they made this all public. Rodgers isn't the type of guy that would come out and talk about this sort of thing, so I wonder how he feels about all this.
I think his brother got stiffed on a Christmas gift, and it's still kind of burning him, and it's just one of those things where, his brother was the one just, screw it, I'm just going to air out all this dirty laundry, and away he went, and I just kind of chuckle about it and move on because I don't care.
If I was Aaron Rodgers, I wouldn't care.
No, why?
I've got Olivia Munn. What do you want?
Yeah, why even acknowledge it? You're on a game show. I've got this. So good luck, pal.
Oh, that's funny. Back to Cam Newton, because, again, conventional wisdom, most cheat sheets I've seen thus far have him listed as the unquestioned number 1 quarterback, and for good reason. I mean, remember going into last year, and this might have been one of our biggest swings and misses of the year last year, was the fact that we pegged Cam Newton as a guy who might not even throw 20 touchdowns in the season.
Whoops.
Hey, I don't think we were the only ones that made that mistake.
No, and that was, it just looking at the team and the way it was built and the way the quarterback was playing at the time. If you look at everybody, no single individual player grew as much in the game and became very seasoned and masterful at the position than Cam Newton did, except for the Super Bowl. He was outstanding, and now he gets Kelvin Benjamin? Oh, my God, are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's the other thing, too, is he had this huge season. We made that prediction about Cam Newton after he lost Kelvin Benjamin for the season.
Yeah, and now they're just going to be back and better than ever.
In standard leagues, Cam Newton scored nearly 450 fantasy points.
That's stupid.
That's, what did he have, over 35 touchdowns passing and 10 rushing last year?
Yeah. He was a beast, and as much as it pains me to say that, he was. Nobody grew and nobody became a stud more than Cam Newton did.
I think it's rather difficult to not rank him as your number 1 quarterback, so I'm being a bit contrarian by putting Andrew Luck up there.
He was my original number 1. I've kind of leaned off, but he's no lower than 2. It's 1 and 1A at this point for me.
So how early do you draft him then?
If Cam Newton is sitting, to me, coming through, I would pull the trigger on round 1 on Cam Newton. If you're towards the back end and, the couple of big picks are off the board, why not? Points speak for itself. We go through and we talk about, outside of the 1 and 1A, there's a huge skill drop-off. Well, if you look at Cam Newton's points, 430-something, what are the next 2 or 3 quarterbacks? I mean, it's a huge point gap outside of those first few, right?
Yeah, at standard leagues last year, and this is a decimal scoring system in this particular league I'm looking at, but Cam Newton scored 448.9 points on the season. That's weeks 1 through 17. Tom Brady was number 2 in fantasy scoring at the quarterback position, 424.8. So we're still talking about a difference of over 20 points, and that's about an average of 1.5 points.
So then what's like number 5 then? What would be the 5th?
Well, that's where you really see the drop-off is actually between 1 and about 6, because at 6, Blake Bortles was your number 6 quarterback last season, and he scored 375.4.
So now factor in Kelvin Benjamin. Put him back into the mix and say, what can he do and what can he add? Would it be safe to say that Kelvin Benjamin alone will add 60 yards a game?
I don't think so. I think he takes some of what Ted Ginn got last season, which was admittedly a lot more than most of us figured Ted Ginn would get. But he also sort of takes away from Devin Funchess, Corey Brown, these players that contributed last year to Carolina, Greg Olsen. That's what I think. And you know what I think as well is looking at Kelvin Benjamin's rookie season in which he, impressed a lot of folks. I noticed that a lot of his production came in garbage time. And I'm not sure that Carolina is going to have a lot of garbage time where they're going to be airing the ball out, considering where that team is now.
I don't really care about garbage time. Look at Calvin Johnson. A lot of his stuff, his record-breaking season came in garbage time, and at the end of the day, in fantasy football world, it doesn't matter where those points come from.
I'm looking at ADP right now, and Cam Newton is currently the 29th player going off the board on average. That's the 6th pick of the 3rd round.
I'm stunned.
The fact that you would take him in the 1st round, I mean, there are going to be leagues like that, particularly those that are awarding quarterbacks 6 points per passing touchdown.
If you get 6, why not?
I guess. I'm just the kind of guy that likes to wait because I think I can get much better value in the 8th, 9th, 10th round. I like to load up on running backs and receivers all the way down the list. Maybe an elite tight end if he's there. But we'll talk draft strategies a little bit later as well. For the quarterback position, then, you're settled on Aaron Rodgers, at least for now, as your top quarterback.
Yeah, I'm going to go with A-Raj.
Well, if that's the case, then would you take A-Raj in the 1st round?
See, now I'm going to talk out both sides of my mouth.
Exactly. You have to almost...
It's situation, and we've been over this 100 times. It's all who was taken before you and where are you drafting. And that's draft strategy is more valuable than your top 100, your top 150. Because fantasy football, to me, is 50% knowledge, 50% reaction. So you've got your list, you've got your plan together, but that plan can go straight out the window if people ahead of you are picking all over the board, and now you're scrambling to save your list or your own strategy.
The reason I'll never end up with a Cam Newton or an Aaron Rodgers or even an Andrew Luck for that matter, any of those top quarterbacks, is because there are people like you out there, Brian.
That's right.
You'll take them way too early.
I will most likely.
I always seem to be happy with like an Eli Manning or a Phillip Rivers or one of these guys, Tony Romo, that I can get in the 8th, 9th, 10th round. And meanwhile, I'm just absolutely loaded on running backs and receivers leading up to that point.
So let me ask you this. If it is a keeper league, which a lot of people are playing keeper leagues now, that's the new trend now. And I don't do anything more than one keeper. If it's a keeper and you are 10 out of 12, and it's technically your 2nd round, because with the keepers, it's technically your 2nd round.
Yep.
Are you pulling him then?
It just depends on the rest of my roster. I'd probably strongly consider it.
Mm-hmm.
But,
all right, then.
But outside of that, if I'm just in a redraft and, I'm snake draft, typical situation.
So I kind of won that argument.
You kind of already, yeah, but here's the problem, Brian, is you just told me to start the segment, your number 1 quarterback is Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I'm talking on both sides of my mouth.
You're now telling me that you would not take Aaron Rodgers in the 1st round if you had the opportunity? Nope, you wouldn't.
It's talking out of both sides of my mouth. You can't. I am the guy who will literally sit there and use all of my time on the clock debating back and forth, kicking the ball back and forth.
He's that guy.
I don't pull the trigger until I rip that sticker off.
Oh, boy. Well, I'm still settled at Andrew Luck, although I probably will not get him in any of my leagues because, well, Andrew Luck is going way too early for my liking. So that's just the way it's got to go. But just to wrap up our discussion on quarterbacks here real quick, we have very different strategies, obviously. I'm much happier drafting my starting quarterback in the later rounds, and you're much happier reaching.
So let me tell you this. So in my big commish, I have Antonio Brown. I will pull Ben Roethlisberger in the 1st round to handcuff them together.
We're going to talk running backs next on 1350 ESPN Radio. Stick around. It is the 515 Fantasy Football Show. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. This is the first show of the 2016-2017 season. Training camps are in progress, Brian. And, boy, I couldn't be more excited about some preseason action getting started here very soon.
It's here. It's happening. I mean, we're on the air. We're talking about it. We're doing it. We're already arguing. It didn't take us more than, 20 minutes to get into it? Hey, that's what it's all about.
Not surprised at all. Now, I mentioned how excited we are about the preseason, but one thing you know about the preseason is not a lot of elite players like to play in the preseason. Maybe a snap here, a snap there, maybe a whole drive. And the top running backs are no exception, especially with the injury history of most of the running backs in the top tier. It's understandable as to why they're a little gun shy. But I will say, Brian, that I'm more excited than most about the running back position this year. Yes, I would probably load up on receivers because I think that elite talent probably runs dry much quicker. And so I'm making sure I'm getting at least one of the elite receivers in my first few rounds. But boy, I'm really excited about some of the potential of the running backs this year.
So I'm usually a guy who's kind of down on running backs. It's really not my thing. However, this year, with the offseason moves that happened, really moved running backs to the right teams to really ramp that position up with some new blood coming into the mix. So like you, I'm now kind of licking my chops and saying, there is some good slices of pie in this running back based on the teams they're with now. That's what you have to be aware of, is who moved where this offseason and who's not fat anymore, who's getting skinny and in shape.
I think we begin the conversation then with Lamar Miller.
You betcha. Wow.
Lamar Miller, who goes from an offense in Miami where he wasn't ever really given a workhorse role. He was held back there by numerous coaches, and I think just inept there in Miami for whatever reason.
We had lots of conversations about that.
But he still finished as the number 6 running back in standard leagues last year despite all this.
Which is stunning.
Imagine going to a Bill O'Brien team, the Houston Texans, where they have a good offensive line, and they have all the pieces in place, and we've seen what Arian Foster has been able to do.
That is a good bingo, sir.
A great passing game, albeit with a new quarterback, a new face under center in Brock Osweiler. But my contention here is that Lamar Miller is unquestionably going to be a number 1 type of running back. And I don't mean number 1 overall scoring. I mean he'll be your top dog if you draft him.
Yeah, he is your RB1. He is in the lineup. Last year you were thinking, nope, got to bench him, got to do this, playing the matchups. No, Lamar Miller locked and loaded 16 weeks.
I only hope that he can stay healthy, Brian, because the sky is the limit for this guy. Now, of course, we can talk about the guys that are going ahead of him as far as ADP goes, and those guys include Todd Gurley, certainly, no matter what format you're in. Typically, I'm seeing guys like David Johnson going ahead of him, Adrian Peterson going ahead of him, even Ezekiel Elliott, the rookie out of Dallas, going ahead of him. We'll get to Ezekiel here in just a little bit. But Lamar Miller, projected right now on a lot of cheat sheets as a number 5, number 6 in terms of fantasy scoring.
Yeah, this is one that we actually agreed on. I have him in my 6th spot, and I think that's right where he fits. I definitely believe he is above Doug Martin. There's no question to me in my mind that he's above David Johnson at this point. But he is below Jamal Charles, to me, Gurley, AP, stuff like that. So I think he's right where he is. He is in that lower RB1 category.
He's currently pick number 10 off the board in consensus ADP. That puts him at the 10th pick of the first round, behind a number of wide receivers and actually a number of running backs here too. And I think one of the reasons why somebody like David Johnson would be ranked ahead of him is because he's maybe a little more involved in the passing game, David Johnson. But Lamar Miller, make no mistake about it, is a dual threat running back. And the thing I really like about Lamar Miller is he has zero competition in that Houston backfield.
Yeah, Alfred Blue was a couple of my bargain bins, I believe.
Boy, did you love you loved you some Alfred Blue last year.
You know what? I just tried. I really tried. But you know what? I'm not afraid to take shots.
Nor am I. Usually Captain Morgan.
Yeah.
Jack Daniels.
Yikes.
You got a headache?
No, you need like a pay raise or something. Jeez, yuck.
Let's talk about Ezekiel Elliott. We mentioned some of the injury concerns that we've got early on here. He's dealing with hamstring issues. If Dallas really wants to feed this guy 300-plus touches this year, he's not going to be healthy for an entire slate of games. There's no way.
But let me ask you this then. If there was ever a year he's going to be completely healthy, it's going to be this one.
That's a tough call. I'm going to say this. He was put in the perfect situation by being drafted number 4 this year by Dallas, a team that has arguably one of the greatest run-blocking offensive lines in all of football. They've got a somewhat, as far as we know, healthy Tony Romo under center. So who's a threat? He can always throw the ball. And he's got a team that should be in most games, if not out in front, you figure.
Yeah. You know, there's a lot of questions. I get what you're saying. For me, the biggest question is, and the offensive line conversation proves it, is where is his first contact going to come from is really what talks to me about durability. Is he taking that first hit at or before the line of scrimmage, or once he's out there running, he can soften the blow as you're kind of juking left and right. And you don't take those head-on collisions 7 yards down the field. You take those head-on collisions at the line of scrimmage. So that line, to me, gives him that durability bump of not being able to let him take them big hits at or behind the line of scrimmage.
How big a believer are you in the theory that Ezekiel Elliott in his rookie season could be a top 5 fantasy running back?
I am betting a draft on it.
Is that right?
Yes, I am. Here's the thing. To me, in my mind, knowing what we know about where he's going and how good of a runner he already is, you have to take that gamble. You have got to roll the dice, because if you don't, the guy after you is going to. So if you pass on what could be one of the biggest lands of the year, are you taking that chance?
I think in dynasty leagues, it's an unquestioned number 1 rookie pick. That's not a question. My question is do you have any concern whatsoever outside of injury about Darren McFadden, who's still with the team, and the fact that the team brought in Alfred Morris?
No.
I'm playing devil's advocate because I don't think either of them are a threat either. Follow the money, my friend.
You drafted him for a reason.
4th.
You drafted him for a reason, and there's only one reason you do that, and that's to give him the football. Look, Latavius Murray, what was he before Dallas last year? You know, so the line makes the runner. So you took a average at best running back, and he was really good. So now put a really good running back there, and now he's going to be really great.
Looking at ADPs for running backs, Todd Gurley is the first one off the board. Do you feel as though Todd Gurley will end up the season as the top fantasy scoring running back?
No, just because of the situation.
Bad team, you mean?
Yeah, bad team.
He is the team, though.
However, he is the team.
Yeah. Brian Westbrook, that worked for him for a number of years in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and when you watch Gurley just literally run through people, I think there's that one play last year where he broke 8 tackles in the same play. You know, it just doesn't matter to guys like this because he gets 20 to 25 touches a game, if not more, and he just runs through people. So it just doesn't matter. To be the best of the best, yeah, I would knee-jerk, I would say no, just because to be the best of the best is pretty hard. There's a lot of factors that go into it. You bet defenses are going to be playing Todd Gurley a whole lot differently this year.
Running down the rest of the top backs, number 2 back is Adrian Peterson. Number 3, David Johnson. 4, Ezekiel Elliott. 5, Lamar Miller. 6, Le'Veon Bell, who's dealing with a suspension to begin the season. I'm not quite sure I'm taking him where that ADP is.
No, he'll slide around maybe 2. But, I mean, you got to think about it. What's 4 weeks? At the end of the day,
it's a quarter of his fantasy production.
Are you going to pass and take a mid-tier wide receiver instead? Probably not.
No, I think if he falls to the right spot, I'm definitely taking him. But then I have to take D'Angelo Williams maybe a round or two later, and I'm not sure I want to do that. Be thinking about that one, though, for sure. After Le'Veon Bell, you've got Jamal Charles, you've got Devontae Freeman, all of these guys that'll unquestionably be picked in the first couple of rounds of your draft. Listen, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back to talk wide receivers, the 515 Fantasy Football Show. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 ESPN Radio, on iTunes, on Stitcher. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. We've been blessed with 2 hours of fantasy talk this season, which is fantastic. We can't thank you enough for that. Brian and I have sort of had our conversations and arguments about the quarterback position, the running back position. We've still got plenty to come, including tight ends, kickers, DSTs, and we're also going to have our pop quiz segment. We're going to talk draft strategy here in just a bit, and the art of the snipe before our first show of the season is over. Regarding receivers, Brian, conventional wisdom, my friend. This season, I think a lot of folks have been scared away by the injury bug of the running back position. So what you're seeing this year is a stack of wide receivers at the top of that first round.
Well, for me, the wide receiver, it's the most consistent out of the group. If you look back at these top 10 receivers, they've been the top 10 receivers for a long time. So there's that chemistry, that history, and that reputation they have. You know, you look at guys like Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham, and when Calvin Johnson was around, you knew they were guaranteed points, period. They were rarely injured, and if they were, they often played injured and still produced better than 95% of the other wide receivers. So it's a comfort pick.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter whether you are in a PPR league, half PPR, or even standard for that matter. These guys are getting the targets, and generally speaking, if you look at a top 10 year in and year out at different positions, that wide receiver position, not a whole heck of a lot of turnover year to year.
No, there's really not, and that's what it pays to know history. You need to know who's consistently catching 90-plus balls or 100 balls if you're in a PPR, stuff like that. It pays to know their touchdowns. It pays to know how long they've been with that quarterback.
Yeah, I don't want to patronize our audience here by any means, Brian, but if there's anybody out there, and you don't have to say anything, embarrass yourself, but if you're not checking into your league's specific scoring system before you join a league and before you draft, you're really setting yourself up for failure. You bring up a good point here. If it's a PPR league and you don't know that, you're in big trouble because your draft is going to look a lot different if you're in a standard league versus a PPR.
Actually, I've been a victim of that before. I joined a friend's league, and I was like, yep, let's do this. Here's my money. Let's draft. I don't need to do anything. And then it wasn't necessarily PPR, but it was the rules. And once I realized what I had done, I was second to the bottom right off the bat, and I knew it.
Yeah. So let's get back into wide receivers. Antonio Brown, I don't think there's any question as to who the number one pick should be at that wide receiver group. And, needless to say, you're looking at a lot of mock drafts right now, no matter what the scoring system, Antonio Brown is the number one pick in a lot of them.
Absolutely. If it's not fixed, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
And I would agree with that. He is the offense when Le'Veon Bell is suspended and Big Ben, drops back and he's looking downfield. It's always seems to be Antonio Brown, and that guy turned in some massive performances last season, finished the season as the number one wide receiver, and that's 2 years in a row he's done that. In standard scoring leagues, Antonio scored 254.2 points in 17 weeks.
And didn't he miss a game or two? Pretty sure he missed at least one.
If I'm not mistaken, he missed, I don't know if he missed any games or if he didn't finish a couple of them.
I don't know. Here's the thing. Antonio Brown, he may not have any touchdowns in a game, but he has 212 yards.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
How does that happen, by the way? Where it doesn't happen very often where a guy has over 200 yards receiving but didn't reach the end zone.
It's those times where you're sitting on your couch watching Sunday Night Football. It's 11 o'clock, and you're begging for that extra yard because 211 isn't good enough.
That's right. So after Antonio Brown, because that's the easy one, let's talk, because I think there's no consensus here as to who's next. Is it Odell Beckham Jr.? Is it Julio Jones? Is it DeAndre Hopkins, A.J. Green, Dez Bryant? Who you got up there near the top?
So I went Odell, Julio, DeAndre.
You did, okay.
Yeah.
I actually just switched around the second and the third. So I actually went Julio, Odell, and then DeAndre.
Yeah, so for me, Odell over Julio, it's a toss-up. Julio's getting older, Odell's younger, but Julio and Matt Ryan have been together for, 6-7 years? So it's just kind of one of those things. At some point, you got to kind of roll the dice, and I believe that the Giants will just play that way more and throw it to him because, as the last few years have shown, that's just what they're going to do. They are literally going to force-feed him the ball.
Well, only about 10 points separated the two of them last season. And if you remember, Odell Beckham did deal with that suspension game. So Julio Jones might have finished as the number 2 scoring wide receiver, but Odell Beckham probably would have surpassed him, I think, on a good guess. Had he played that game where he got suspended. So you might be on to something, Brian, but you might be on something too. I have no idea. Julio is a guy that's going to get a massive amount of targets because who else does Matt Ryan really have to throw to outside of Devontae Freeman? Nobody. Odell Beckham, it could be argued that there are several guys that Eli Manning could look at, including the talented rookie Sterling Shepard.
That, and I even heard Victor Cruz is looking like pre-injury form, and that just makes me want to dance for some chunky soup.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I'm going to be drafting Mr. Cruz at all, but, for those of you that feel like drafting Victor Cruz in the later rounds, power to you.
But to me, that's a knowledge play there because Cruz, you see that name and you just move on from it. But if you have your roster built, that is... to me, that has a chance to, that ceiling is so high with him where if you can grab him late because everyone else is avoiding him based off of name recognition and they don't know that he's looking really smooth and really healthy, that could be a huge win for you. And ultimately, especially in a bye week, could fill in for one of your stud receivers and like you never even missed a beat.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at the ADPs here, Brian. And again, no matter what your scoring system is, you find so many of these wide receivers in the top 12 picks. And I'm looking down the list here. Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham, Julio Jones, DeAndre Hopkins, A.J. Green, and Dez Bryant all showing up on a consensus ADP list here. Followed, of course, by Allen Robinson of Jacksonville, whom I think a lot of people expect a little bit of regression from. But I'm not so sure. I mean, this guy is a total stud. Jacksonville hasn't yet quite turned a corner where they're going to be winning games late. They're probably still playing from behind in many games, don't you think?
Yeah, but they're right there. I mean, Jacksonville is right there on developing a complete team, in which complete teams can hurt that wide receiver position. We say can, but ultimately a stud is a stud, and they're going to get the ball.
Following Allen Robinson is Jordy Nelson, who's coming off an ACL injury that kept him out all of last year. Provided this other knee isn't an issue and he can come back and play at near 100%. Jordy Nelson as one of the top receivers off the board. What level of faith do you have in him?
I have a lot, just because the coaching staff is not going to make the same mistake twice. They can't. Green Bay is way too smart of an organization to make the same mistake twice. And injuries aren't a mistake, but playing them in a meaningless game is.
Next on the list is Brandon Marshall, who jumped way up in ADP once Ryan Fitzpatrick re-signed in New York for 1 year. I had no doubt that would happen. Some of my buddies who are Jets fans were convinced that it was Geno Smith time. Well, they said that last year too, and I kept telling them the better quarterback's Ryan Fitzpatrick.
I thought it was Geno time too, just based off of some things that even came out of the locker room. They're saying, yeah, Geno's our quarterback, and away we go. But you know what? That's why I'm crazy.
By the way, Brandon Marshall finished number 3 among fantasy wide receivers last season.
Had a guy in the league who owned Decker and Marshall both. And he didn't realize he did it, and that's why he actually won games because of those two.
Decker ended up as number 11. I think he's going to be one of the biggest bargains in all of the wide receiver category in drafts this year for how late that guy is going.
Do you think it's that, or do you think he's going to have a reduction because of the new running back addition?
No way.
No?
Matt Forte will contribute, no question, and will be a help to that Jets offense. But, I mean, will Eric Decker either score a touchdown or go for 100 yards receiving or both in every game like he did last year? Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. But I'm going to tell you this. I have a lot of faith in those guys, and I think Matt Forte will overall help that offense become higher scoring overall. So we're really just kind of adding on to what the team did last year. And Brandon Marshall's going to get his. You know he will. And he will continue to jump up in ADP as well. Brian, we're getting very close. It's almost time. We bring the pop quiz back. 3 very, very difficult questions that Brian must answer without any prior research whatsoever. And, well, we'll see how he does here in just a bit on 1350 ESPN Radio. Welcome back. It is the 515 Fantasy Football Show. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. This is our second season on 1350 ESPN Radio, iTunes, Stitcher, a number of places you can find us, but we hope you'll like us on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football. Follow us on Twitter at 515 Fantasy. We love interacting, don't we, Brian?
I actually do. It's fun. It's why we do it. We do it for you, the listeners, and everybody out there interacting. That's the fun part of it, is having conversations about who should start over who, or in bye weeks, or in tough draft choices. What do you want to do?
Yeah, here's some extra added incentive in case you don't like us already on Facebook. There's a new technology on Facebook called Facebook Live, where I can literally take my phone and broadcast live to all of my followers. They all get a notification that says 515 Fantasy Football is now live, and they can click right into it, look at me, and maybe I can do this on Sunday morning before kickoff or something. And if they have questions about who to start, any injury updates, things like that, I can do that live on my phone from my living room, and you guys can fire questions at me and stuff. I could probably use this technology, for the show. Be pretty cool.
I think it's going to be awesome. I think it'll give that added benefit and that value to the show and to the listeners. Hey, if it's 11:05 Sunday morning, you're like me toggling your roster back and forth on your phone as you're supposed to be watching your kid not playing on the stairs. You have the opportunity now to ask Andy and get your problem resolved, so I'm not on the hook.
I feel like this is going to become a thing where eventually all these, big shots that do fantasy football eventually are going to jump on that bandwagon too. So we're hitting the ground running here.
We're first.
Trendsetters as usual.
Absolutely.
Right,
that's what Iowa's for, right?
Right here in Des Moines, Iowa, kind of like we were with Gary Barnage last year.
That's true.
Trendsetters. All right, Brian, it is time for the pop quiz. 3 very, very, very difficult questions I'm going to ask you. Brian has not seen these questions, not heard these questions, had no way of prepping for these questions, and he's just going to give us his, answer right off the top of his head, essentially. So, we're hoping for the best for you, Brian, but no matter what you answer, right or wrong, I'm right there with the correct answer to follow. So, are you ready for your 3 questions?
Let's get her done.
First question is, what round is most ideal to find the best value for a fantasy quarterback?
To me, your best value is between 6 and 8.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, you 5, you should have 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, at least, and maybe you're lucky to nab one of those 2 tight ends out there. Maybe you have your 3 wide receivers and 2 running backs. I mean, fill up your roster, and then if you can get one of those higher echelon quarterbacks. A higher echelon meaning top third of the league. So why not? Why not just wait it out a little bit and get that value, because teams get hot, and if you get that quarterback on the top of the scoring roster, you score huge.
Well, Quarterbacks you can get between the 6th and 8th rounds currently: Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady,
Suspension affected that one a little bit.
Carson Palmer, Blake Bortles, Eli Manning. All these guys you can get in those rounds.
I can't see Big Ben getting that late.
We're going to talk about Big Ben a little later because I think people are spending too much. I think no. I think if you look at his numbers year after year, not nearly as impressive as you'd think they would be. So there you have it. My answer here, okay, I agree with you. I think those are good spots, but you know me. I like to wait.
Was it 10 to 12?
I say 11th round.
Whoa.
This is the spot where you can grab Matthew Stafford.
Oh, I'd take that any day of the week.
Who was 10th among quarterbacks last year, and Matt Ryan, who looks to bounce back this year. Imagine being able to load up on running backs, receivers, and a top-notch tight end with your first 10 picks of a draft.
That'd be insane. I would take Stafford in the 11th any day of the week.
Truth be told, only about 50 points separated Carson Palmer, fantasy's number 4 quarterback, from Stafford last year. You spread that out over 17 weeks, that's less than 3 points a week.
Stafford, and I think if you look at it for the last 8 games of the season, Stafford was like the 3rd best quarterback.
Nobody was hotter. Yeah, there was like nobody hotter. Maybe Cam Newton. That's it.
Yeah.
Stafford was pretty awesome. And I think even despite the loss of Megatron, I think things are going to be just fine in Detroit land. On to question number 2. Is there an ideal scoring format for fantasy football?
No, I don't think so. As long as they're not outrageous on the outer ends of your bell curve, I think it's fun to mix it up, and I think it's fun to change things up. I think it's fun to adjust points for kickers this year and how those things are playing out. I think it's fun to adjust passing touchdowns and rushing touchdowns and yardages and balancing things out to the changing times of the NFL.
The correct answer is no.
Of course.
But the trend in the past couple of years is toward some sort of PPR, whether it's full PPR or half PPR. The one format I will say should be implemented in 100% of leagues is decimal scoring. The word tie should be considered a dirty word in fantasy circles, at least in my opinion.
Completely agree. I absolutely hate. You have technology, and this should not end in a tie. Period. Why? You can make a decimal point. It's not hard.
No. All right, so we agree on number 2.
Yay.
Question number 3. Which of these draft strategies holds the better value? Team A takes Le'Veon Bell in the 1st round and D'Angelo Williams in the 5th. Team B takes Dion Lewis in the 4th round and LeGarrette Blount in the 9th.
I would take Team B. Team 2. Is that what you want?
Like
2?
the Lewis and Blount.
Yeah, the Lewis and Blount.
It's like, aren't those the guys that discovered America or something?
Yeah, pretty close, actually. Yeah. It's funny, though, that your scenario has Le'Veon Bell and LeGarrette Blount together in it. But, you said, hey, Le'Veon Bell's out for 4 weeks, and there's nothing that's going to change that. So to take him in the 1st round, there's no value in that in the 1st round. Period.
The answer is actually Team A.
Oh, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I kind of pulled a switcheroo on you there. Even if you took 25% of his potential fantasy points away, Bell's ceiling is still that of a top 3 running back. Let me repeat that real quick for you. Even if you took a quarter, 25%, that's 4 games out of 16 of his potential fantasy points away, Bell's ceiling is still that of a top 3 running back.
Do we have handy the first 4 opponents for the Steelers?
No, but I can probably get it for you.
I would say, because that would be something to look at. Because if he's got terrible defenses in the front half of the season, that may factor into your draft. Or if he's got just a ton of tough run defenses, you know what? If you have the option to start the extra wide receiver and only do 1 running back, and draft it, that might be something you look, hey, you know what? I just got myself an idea.
Did you just talk yourself into something here?
I think I accidentally did.
I like it.
On air.
I like that when
Whoops.
that happens. All right, so take Bell's stats in 2014. Less 25%. You've essentially got Adrian Peterson of 2015.
That's pretty good.
How does that sound?
That's pretty tasty.
I mean, come on.
Pretty tasty.
It's ridiculous.
I still stand by my answer, though, because it's a trick question.
No, it's not, and I'm going to further explain. Williams is the unquestioned starter in games 1 through 4, right? Finished 4th among running back scoring last year. Now, Lewis and Blunt each have potential to be later round steals in the draft, but neither should necessarily be considered a handcuff to the other. If nothing else, Lewis and Blunt could be complementary pieces on one fantasy team, don't you think? Theoretically, couldn't that be the case? You couldn't say that about Bell or Williams.
Well, I would say this is the disadvantage of having to do a knee-jerk reaction without the time of scripting out your entire answer on your paper.
I want to keep the conversation of draft strategy going into the next segment as well, because I think the way that people approach drafts in general varies from person to person. It varies pretty greatly. Maybe what we could do is, like the first round, you and I just go back and forth and do a little mock draft, and then we can kind of discuss how we approached it. Because I think you approach drafts maybe a little bit differently than I do. I think you're a little more cerebral than I, Brian.
I don't even know what that means.
I know. I'll explain it to you.
I'll go with it, though.
I'll explain it to you.
I think it means good looking.
I don't know. It doesn't mean that. In fact, it's probably the opposite of that, to be quite honest. You did okay for the first pop quiz of the season, Brian.
Yeah, 33%, not bad.
I'm not.
If that was baseball, I'd be all right.
I think last year you went 0 for in the first one, so
Very likely.
But
yes.
I wrote the questions and worded them specifically so you would screw them up. That's how much I like my co-host, by the way. All right, so we're going to continue the talk about draft strategies, maybe do a one-round mock between Brian and I coming up here in just a bit. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show, our maiden voyage in this, the second season. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. You're hearing us on 1350 ESPN Radio in Des Moines, or iTunes, or Stitcher, or via the ESPN Des Moines website. There's a lot of places they can get our show, Brian.
Yeah, I'm just super happy to be all over this. We're back at this again. We have lots of outlets to find our show if you're unable to listen, or if you did hear something during the show that you want to go back to, you have that ability to go out there and download the podcast to review at your leisure, or fact check us as well.
Yeah, and you know what? One thing we really appreciated last season, and we're hoping we can get more folks to do it this year and really help us out, is when you not only rate but leave a review of our show on iTunes in particular. Those of you that have iPhones, just jump on, go to our page, rate it, leave a review. The more love we get from you in that respect, the easier it'll be to find this show. And we really do appreciate it very, very much.
Yes, that's very true. The more you give us, the more hits it gets, the more visible it is to everybody, and that's ultimately the goal is to be able to share the knowledge as much as we can.
I think this will be fun to do, Brian. Between the two of us, just trade picks back and forth, and go through a 1-round standard league, 12-team, and go. You can have the first pick.
I get the first
Why
pick?
not? I did this last year
Excellent.
too. I don't know why I keep giving you things.
So, and this is standard scoring and everything. We're just doing a hypothetical. Does this include suspensions?
Of course, yeah, it's real life.
It's real life. That's right. I forget. You know what? I'm going to go safety, and I'm just going to roll with AP. Honestly,
Okay.
I think that's where it is. Why not? He's going to do exactly what he did last year.
Huge fan of Adrian Peterson. I have no problem with that in standard leagues. Now, if we were doing PPR or half PPR, I would think you're crazy with that pick.
Well, I don't like PPRs.
I know, but I'm just saying if this were
But it's not
that would
standard.
change your draft strategy quite a bit, would it not?
Absolutely.
Again, we'll go back to what we said earlier in the show. You got to know your
You
team's
gotta know.
scoring and rules before you even join the league, really.
Because if it's PPR, I'm taking Antonio Brown.
Absolutely. No
'Cause
question.
He catches 15 balls a game, so that's 15 points or 7.5 points.
You're lucky if Adrian
That's a
Peterson
touchdown or
gets
two.
15 passes in a season.
Yeah. So if it's PPR, it's Antonio. So is this PPR league? I
No,
forgot
it's a
to ask.
standard league. I already
Yeah,
said that.
so there we go. Then I will stick with Adrian Peterson.
I have no
Just
problem
trying
with
to
that.
start fights.
No, I just like to remind you, and again, I'm not about patronizing my listeners. I just want to throw the little reminder out there for you. All right, so you take Adrian Peterson with the first overall pick. With the second overall pick, I thank you kindly for leaving Antonio Brown there for me. Thank you very much.
You can have him, then I will go with Todd Gurley.
So you're loading up on running back right off the
Sure
jump.
am.
All right, fine. You want to do that with the third pick. You took Todd Gurley. Fourth pick, I think I'm going to go David Johnson.
Okay. I'll pull Zeke, man. I'll pull Ezekiel Elliott right now.
Fifth pick goes Ezekiel Elliott. Sixth pick, Julio Jones is still there. He's got to be taken right there at 6.
Yeah, but there's so many good running backs out there. You're just leaving them out there.
I just love how you and I differ so
we
much.
do. So
It's-
one of us is going to be right.
It pained me to take David Johnson at 4th pick.
Yeah, that's just silly. You're silly. I mean, we just talked about Lamar Miller being a stud too.
I know. Are you going to take him with the 7th
I'm
pick?
going to.
Okay. 7th pick is Lamar Miller. I'm going to go ahead with the 8th pick and grab A.J. Green.
Good, because I wanted Odell Beckham.
9th, you can have him. Oh, did we leave him on the board?
Yeah, you
Oh,
did.
God. That was my mistake. What a disaster.
Yeah.
This
that
happens in real
scores.
drafts, by the way. This happens in real drafts. I probably should have just marked them off as they were being picked because I probably would have taken them there. But anyway, you can have them. Let's see. So we're now at the 8th pick? I lost track. No, we're the 10th pick now. 10th pick. All right, 10th pick. I think this is where I have to look at either grabbing, if I want Le'Veon Bell, I might have to take him here. DeAndre Hopkins is still on the board. I like Hopkins.
I was looking at Hopkins or Dez, and I will go with Dez. I will
You can
cap
have
off
Dez.
around with Dez.
All right, and the final pick of the first round is Rob Gronkowski.
So that was the ninja pick.
Bam!
You know how much that would aggravate the 11 spot coming back? Because I was thinking, okay, you go back, and then you come back, and you get Gronk. So you got a top-tier receiver plus Gronk, who is a top-tier receiver. And then people like you just make me go, are you kidding me? And then just slam stuff down. It's like, well, you know who he was taking.
At the beginning of the show, I mentioned that at some point here before the end of the show, we're going to talk about something I like to call the art of the snipe.
Ninja.
What I just did to you was the snipe.
Yeah. And it happens all the time. And, if you're – so here's the other part is drafting as much offense as it is defense. Because if you're watching somebody else, and especially when it comes to running backs, you're watching somebody and they've got 3 receivers down and you've got a receiver and 2 running backs, I might pull that 3rd running back because you have none.
Yeah.
You have none.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny how, if you're looking at the big board, and everybody should have a big board if you're doing a live draft, because it changes things. You're not just looking at your little cheat sheet or your magazine or whatever you bring with you to the draft. You're looking at that thing, and they're all color-coded.
Mm-hmm.
So you can look and see who's stacking running backs, who's
Yep,
stacking
absolutely.
receivers. What do they need? They need a quarterback, so I better grab mine now.
Absolutely.
So things like that contribute to the art of the snipe, which I was going to talk about later, but here we are talking about it. We're supposed to be talking about draft strategies, Brian. What is your strategy going into a standard league draft?
My standard league draft is my number one strategy, and I typically break it quickly, is to not gamble with your first 3 picks.
Okay. No risk.
No risk in the first 3 picks. I usually break that in round 2.
Oh, do you really?
I do.
Give me an example. What do you mean by that?
So for me, you want a stud running back and you want 2 top tier receivers.
Okay, so let's say you took Adrian Peterson with your first round pick. What do you do in the second round that breaks that mold?
if I'm coming back and there's, the first 5 wide receivers are off the board.
Oh, Lamar Miller's still there.
But Lamar Miller's there.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of thinking, but wait a minute. If I'm in the middle of the order, Cam Newton's still there?
Oh.
Maybe. Am I going to pull the trigger on this here?
Oh, boy.
Am I going to do this?
And you can
am I
see it
really
coming
gonna
from
do
a
this?
mile away.
Yeah, and it's just like, you know what? I hope somebody really just changes my mind. But then it keeps happening, and then sometimes I talk myself into it. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I stick to my strategy, but it's really about making sure you don't miss with those first 3 picks.
Okay.
That's really my strategy. However, my secondary strategy is to watch, because just like we talked about, is if that trend is through 4 rounds, nobody's taken a quarterback or one person has, and you are on an end. You have to think the next 23 picks could have 10 quarterbacks in it. Do you want the number 1 or 2 quarterback, or do you want the number 12th quarterback? And
You know my answer.
But where does that fit into the rest of your roster?
Sure.
Are you so...
You can take 2 quarterbacks before I even get my first. I don't care.
Strategy number 3 is I need to stack my bye weeks.
Okay.
Because
you're a proponent of stacking the bye weeks, which is, for those of you that don't know, trying to find as many players that you love and want to draft that have the same exact bye week. So essentially, you're just handicapping yourself for just 1 week of the season.
Yeah.
That's a guaranteed loss. The rest of the year, you're full strength.
Because when you are looking at judging a team, you're saying, oh, man, this team is stacked. But if they all have different bye weeks, you are never playing at full strength except for 6 games a year. Mm-hmm. So your team on paper looks really good, but your effective rate is terrible because you're not at full strength ever. So one of your people is always out. And that's the difference between subbing a person in who's going to maybe get you 8 points or a stud who's going to get you 18 points.
Sure. I think it's pretty obvious to most at this point what my draft strategy is. No matter what the scoring format is, I am a best player available, and I tend to err on the side of wide receivers. So let's say I have my tiers set up, and it comes down to a choice between a running back and a receiver. I will always pick the receiver, unless I'm already set at receiver, at which point I'll look at tight end.
So let me ask you this.
I wait on running backs generally. I definitely wait on quarterbacks.
Do you fill your starting roster first before you start drafting your secondary position?
Not necessarily. In my best player available draft and the way I set up my cheat sheets, I'm making sure I'm not reaching too far for guys unless I'm absolutely convinced that they're going to be outperform their ADP. But generally speaking, for me, those guys are either receivers or tight ends. So running backs I wait on, quarterbacks I really wait on, and I just load up in those first several rounds. But yeah, I'm with you in terms of the first few picks, trying to minimize risk. But again, for me, what is risk? It's running backs. I've been doing what is happening on most cheat sheets this year. I've been doing this for a long time, where you see all these receivers stacked at the top. I've been doing that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's worked pretty well for me, Brian. So going to be breaking down some more positions here in just a little bit. In one segment, we're going to try to fit in tight ends, kickers, and DSTs, conversations on that, and talk the art of the snipe as well before we wrap up the first show of the 2016-2017 season. We thank you for listening. We hope you'll stick with us. You are listening to 1350 ESPN Radio. 515 Fantasy Football. You are listening to 1350 ESPN Radio or iTunes or Stitcher. Either way, we're happy you're here. Andy Hall, Brian Eikenberry, taking you through this first of many shows of the 2016-2017 season. Training camps are happening now, Brian. Preseason games begin here very shortly, and before you know it, my man, we're going to be past Labor Day and hitting the gridiron for regular season action. It's pretty remarkable how quickly the month of August goes.
is literally in sniffing distance. I can smell the hot dogs and beer. And just thinking about what am I going to eat on Sunday, that makes me happy.
Oh, that's a very happy feeling.
I'm so excited to just gorge myself anymore.
Absolutely. Fire that grill up. We have talked quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. We have yet to talk tight ends, kickers, and DSTs. I'm hoping to hit all three here in this segment, Brian. In terms of draft strategy, it's for tight ends, it's pretty much Gronk and everybody else again this year. Although a guy named Jordan Reed out of Washington is making some noise and moving up ADPs.
Yeah, I think you've got 3, maybe 5 that you need to get your hands on if tight end is a required position in your league.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, you might as well just wait till the last round.
It's true. You bring up a very good point. And when I can't get my hands on one of those elite guys, and Gronk is definitely in a tier of his own, but then you've got Jordan Reed. Greg Olsen is probably up there for you. Travis Kelce's probably up there for you, I'm guessing. Delaney Walker might even be up there for you. These are all guys that, you want to target, and hopefully you can get them at or around their ADP. If not, it's kind of a crapshoot in tight end land.
Yeah, tight end play equals what is the team doing, and outside of those 5, you see your tight end might score 10 points one week, and then 5 weeks he has less than 3 points each. So that's extremely frustrating. So back to the whole draft strategy thing. If tight end is a required position for you, you need to be thinking about that. You need to be looking at the board and counting them off and realizing where you're drafting, and maybe even starting to talk up other receivers out loud to get somebody off of their thought process. You need one of those 5.
It's going to be an interesting year as far as that goes, and who knows if you'll even be able to get one of those top-notch guys where you want them. I think that's the trick, because if I can't get a guy where I want him, I'm fine just kind of sitting around and waiting. Tight end isn't really all that important a position to me unless I can get, again, the guys we mentioned a bit ago.
Yeah,
Gronk,
absolutely.
Reed.
And I tend to like leagues that are going to where tight end's not required anymore just because of the way the NFL works. And that's what we go back to an evolving league.
What do you think about Kobe Fleener, who's making his debut in New Orleans this season? We've seen him perform well in the past in Indianapolis, but he always was splitting time with Dwayne Allen, who, by the way, is now on his own there in Indy. Kobe Fleener, an interesting name.
Yeah, you want to, just based on the team and the action, what Jimmy Graham was capable of doing, and all of this really cool stuff. But for me, watching the Saints play last year and trying to bet on who's doing what, they really have spread the ball around and got a lot of people involved in that passing game. So it's kind of tough for me to say yay or nay on Fleener.
He's another reason why I absolutely love Drew Brees this year. I mean, Drew Brees is guaranteed 4,000 yards passing, 30 touchdowns every year.
I hope so.
Well, I mean, people are discounting Drew Brees now because of his age and because he, doesn't have Jimmy Graham, and, maybe he's lost a step. He didn't have the greatest year last year, but oh wait, actually he had a pretty darn good year last year.
He started out bad, but tore it up at the end.
He's very consistent. And going back to what I said earlier about Ben Roethlisberger, you haven't looked up his stats yet, have you?
No.
Yeah, I don't think Ben has ever thrown more than 32 touchdown passes in a year, and he only did that once. And his yardage isn't really all that impressive either compared to some of the other guys that are being drafted right around him or even after him, for that matter. Drew Brees is a guy that you're seeing drafted after a Ben Roethlisberger on a lot of draft boards this year, which I think is insane. I'll take Drew Brees any day.
I hope so, but man, numbers don't lie, but they don't tell the whole story. So there's that.
Well, this is fantasy football, Brian, so it's kind of all about the numbers.
Kind of.
Okay. Yeah, you're getting all cerebral on me again here.
Yeah.
Have you looked that word up yet? Cerebral?
No, I haven't. I'm busy.
Look it up before
talking on a show.
Look it up before the end of the show. Some other guys that I think are a little undervalued here. Jimmy Graham.
Yeah.
Could there be a nice little bounce back for him this year? I mean, now that he's, he went through the injury. He also went through the frustration of, I don't think Seattle knew how to handle.
Yeah, we had that conversation. Is they just don't have it figured out yet. They don't have it figured out yet. And then they started figuring out. He's not just a tight end. He is Jimmy Graham. And Jimmy Graham runs certain routes, and they do this. And Seattle's never had to deal with that, and Pete Carroll's never had to deal with that. So it was just new, and once they figured it out, started turning things around.
I'm a little skeptical about Seattle's running game this year. Anytime you're replacing somebody like Marshawn Lynch, that's bound to be the case. I like Thomas Rawls, but I feel like Russell Wilson will pass more than we typically see him pass this year. I think they're going to rely a little more on his feet, finding space, scrambling, and then eventually finding a receiver open downfield. Now, he had no problem finding Doug Baldwin late last year. And Doug Baldwin's an interesting case study in himself. But Jimmy Graham is another guy that I think if you just let him go downfield, he's a guy that'll create some space between himself and either linebackers or D-backs, and Russell Wilson can keep a play alive with his feet. He'll find Jimmy Graham downfield, and Jimmy Graham can do the rest. He looks like Gronk when you get him the ball, and he's actually running with a ball. He runs over people.
Yes, he does. I think Russell Wilson is going to really solidify him because the big knock is he's not a top 5 QB, not this, because he was never the traditional guy. But he also wins a ton of games, and he finds ways to get it done.
So here's another question regarding the tight end position. Do you believe Gary Barnidge is the guy he was last year?
Yes.
Okay.
And here's why.
No matter who the quarterback is in Cleveland?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Because I don't think the quarterback is important to the tight end as it is to a receiver.
If anything else, a tight end could be a security blanket for a quarterback who's having some trouble, right?
Absolutely. That's the old adage to a rookie quarterback is a rookie's best friend is the tight end.
I don't think anything's going to hurt him there in terms of targets. I think he's going to be targeted just as much as he was last year. Even the fact that Josh Gordon has potential to crack the lineup in Cleveland now.
If anything, that helps Barnidge.
I think so too. They drafted Corey Coleman, another wideout. They must really like what they've got in Barnidge because about the only thing that's sort of like undefined in that Cleveland offense is the running game.
Yeah, I'm a Barnidge guy. He's still up there on my early position ranks. He was number 3, and to me, he's still there. I don't see any reason to move him off of there.
I'm not sure if Greg Olsen has ever missed a game, so durability is a big reason why I would draft him where he is. A couple of guys I sort of still have my eye on that virtually nobody's talking about is number 1 is Antonio Gates, who's, by the way, still playing.
I don't know how.
In San Diego. Hey, I've always been that guy that's like, give him a chance. Give him a chance. He's not done yet.
2 years ago, when everybody wrote him off,
Mm-hmm.
he won me a lot of money.
Another sleeper for me at the tight end position, you'll agree with me, is Eric Ebron.
Yeah, so obviously no secret I watch the Lions pretty religiously. I'm pretty involved. And you know what? He's spending a lot of time on the jugs machine fixing those drops. And if there was his make or break year to legitimize his contract situation heading into the next year, this needs to be it because he has that reputation for dropping a lot of clutch passes.
One last name I want to bring up real quick, and I want your quick reaction, your hot take on Martellus Bennett.
I was looking at that name.
Aha! He's in New England. They're planning on running a lot of 2 tight end sets, I'm told.
Yeah, I don't know.
Come on.
The last guy was there, shot somebody, so.
3 guys hanging on Gronk. There's Martellus Bennett, all by himself.
But if there's 3 guys hanging on Gronk, wouldn't that help out Edelman?
Maybe, but I just think that they're already running two wide receiver or two tight end sets that, if Gronk is a guy that's going to get shadowed, covered like crazy, I think Martellus Bennett's going to be open more times than not, and I think that's great news for him because they will send him out in the patterns like they used to with Aaron Hernandez. So
yeah, we'll see.
We hope for a better outcome, obviously, for him. Stick around. We're going to talk the art of the snipe coming up. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 ESPN Radio. Back here on 1350 ESPN Radio, the 515 Fantasy Football Show, which you hear every Thursday between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. Of course, you can also find us on iTunes and Stitcher. We appreciate you listening. We hope you hang with us all season long. And most importantly, we hope that we help you win a fantasy championship. You can't win a fantasy championship, Brian, without a good kicker or defense special teams unit. We didn't talk about that a bit ago because we were so busy talking about the tight end position. So real quick, are there kickers that you will take before the last round?
My strategy for kickers is find one whose home games are indoors.
Interesting.
Period.
I like that.
I don't invest anything into it. I need an indoor kicker.
Okay. So you like a guy like Chandler Catanzaro from Arizona?
Or a Lion.
Oh, you're going to go Matt Prater, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go with history and go with indoors.
I like Matt Prater. Matt Prater's okay. I'm not sure I would take anybody outside the last round, though. Or, you know what? The round before the last round, because the last round I like to take like a complete flyer.
Yep, same way.
Yeah.
Same way.
So maybe the round before the last round is when I'm targeting a kicker, and it's whoever kind of falls to me. But I kind of like your strategy because I'm not going to reach for a Steven Gostkowski. And, granted, you're going to have to take him in the 10th round if you want him. Then there's just a bunch of other guys. There's Justin Tucker, who's always typically got a big leg and accurate and good at what he does. Then you pick like guys who are on high-scoring offenses, Dan Bailey for Dallas, Blair Walsh, Minnesota, Stephen Hauschka, Seattle. Those names come to mind. But for me, yeah, I like the indoor kicker thing, Brian. That's a great idea.
Yeah, because hey, you never know what the weather's going to be. Gostkowski. Oh, well, Gostkowski kicks outside. Yeah, but there's also games where it's snowing and 45-mile-an-hour winds. And if you, at the time, if it's week 15, 16, which just happens to be your championship rounds, and it's 40 degrees outside, or 40-mile-an-hour winds and snowing in New England, and you need every point to win your championship, and your kicker puts up a goose egg because they can't kick a 20-yard field goal, it's a problem. And I'm not willing to risk it because if I lost because of a kicker, I'd be very upset.
Switching gears to defense and special teams, Brian, are there any teams that you're targeting specifically, and where do you think you'll have to take them in order to get them?
I think if people have been doing their homework and really understanding what's happening in the Seahawks secondary, how they are all back together, you're going to have to go early to snag the Seahawks. And I would reach, depending on how you're scoring, sacks and interceptions and all that stuff. You know what? I'll push it up there into 8-9.
They're currently the third defense taken at pick 112. That's the first round of the 10th, or the first pick of the 10th round.
Yeah, so that's pretty close, 8-9.
So if you take them in 8-9, you're practicing the art of the snipe.
Yeah, you betcha.
So the art of the snipe essentially is this. And real quick, I just want to say, I'll take Denver. I'll take Arizona. I will take Houston. I'll take Minnesota. I'll take Kansas City. I will take any of those defenses wherever I can get them. And typically, if I want one specific, I'm going to have to practice the art of the snipe, which is what you just sort of alluded to. Study up on ADP, average draft position. Now, at this point, we're into August now. Training camp is open. Preseason games right around the corner. You probably already should have been doing some mock drafts. Where do you go for your mock drafts, Brian?
I just do mine through Yahoo. It's quick, it's simple, button click, you're in, and you're done.
I know Fantasy Wizard, I think, is one that's out there. The one I like the best is fantasyfootballcalculator.com. It's real live draft. It immediately calculates your draft into their overall ADP numbers.
Oh, cool.
I have them right here in front of me. So when I say consensus ADP, thousands and thousands of drafts are being done every day on this Fantasy Football Calculator website, and they're all being figured in and calculated, and I can look at it every single day and see if anything's changed. I study my ADP. Here's why. Because when we're in a certain place in a draft, no matter where you're drafting from in your draft, you're going to get kind of a feel for what players might be available as the pick approaches you. You're also going to be paying close attention to your adversaries who are either in the room with you really or virtually, and you're paying close attention to how their rosters are being created. Everybody, as we mentioned earlier, has different draft strategies. One of mine happens to be keeping a close eye on ADP, especially after we get past those first few quote-unquote safe picks, as you put it, Brian, because it's at that point that you can actually do a little bit of reaching if you need to and grab guys you really want. Now, what I did to you earlier in the show in the mock draft is I took Rob Gronkowski at the 12 pick. When you thought that he would probably be there in the early second round, I took him just ahead of his ADP. Right now, Rob Gronkowski is the 13th player selected off of the fantasyfootballcalculator.com website's ADP. That's the first pick of the second round. I had the final pick of the first round, and I took Rob Gronkowski there. So that is the art of the snipe, is if guys are drafting according to what the majority of experts out there will tell them, magazines, whatever you bring with you to the draft, you print off a cheat sheet from ESPN or Fox or CBS or any of those places, you're going to get an idea of who's going to be available as that pick approaches you. And you can snipe players away from guys who might have thought they were going to be coming to their pick.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. And the art of the snipe really puts emphasis on the corners or on the ends of a draft, because just like you did, you pulled Gronk. If you think about that, you have two high-caliber receivers. We'll just call him what he is. It's 23 picks until it gets back to you. Mm-hmm. There will be no more top-caliber receivers by the time it gets back to you. It will be completely empty. And then you will make two more picks of either mid-tier running back or mid-receivers again, and then wait another 23 picks. So the snipe is exceptionally important on the ends. But if you're in the middle, you can play that spoiler. So it works both ways.
But then people make fun of you for reaching, I think, is what happens there.
Oh, man, that's just normal.
Now, of course, we're talking snake draft. Some guys, like myself, are involved in some leagues where you're auctioning players. And if that's the case, you never want to put up the players that you really want. You want to let somebody else put them up, and you want to come in and snipe them at the last second.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to watch how much money you have and how much other people have.
Yep.
And you know what? Put the guy under who you want, and let people bid and waste their money because they think it's happening now, and you got to get them, and then you kind of sit back and follow through on your plan.
They don't know who's going to be fighting them for that player, and then somebody comes in and bids with like 2 minutes left in the auction, and then somebody comes in and tries to outbid them with 30 seconds left in the auction. Meanwhile, I've got my atomic clock on me, and I'm like, I know the split second that auction's going to be over, and I am right there to make that bid at the last possible second, and that is the perfect snipe in auction leagues.
This is why people don't like you.
This is why people hate me, because, and you know what? Any of my league mates that are listening right now, they never even thought of the atomic clock. They were like, now they're going to be like, what's an atomic clock? How can I get my hands on an atomic clock?
Is it illegal?
Do I have to be a millionaire to get an atomic clock? What is this atomic clock you speak of? It is the most accurate clock on the planet. It's never wrong. And I have one. Specifically for that purpose, I spent the money on an atomic clock, Brian, so that I could sit there and tick off all the guys that are in my auction league with me. That's the truth of the matter, buddy. And you, my friend, have just joined.
I did.
Oh, this was a fun show, Brian. For the first one of the season, we have a lot more ground to cover before the games have begun. Once we get into the season, of course, we'll be breaking down each of the matchups as we always do with our letter grades. Brian and I will alternate back and forth, and it'll just be rapid fire. But of course, we've got a little extra time to play with now with the extra hour of fantasy football talk, so we'll find some other things to fit in there as well.
It's been fun. It's been exciting. I love it. I dig it. Just happy to have the opportunity to come and do this again, talk about the stuff we love doing, and hopefully we have some great arguments along the way, and hopefully we can just help people out. That's really what this is, and that's why we do it.
No matter how you found us, whether it's on the radio at 1350 ESPN in Des Moines, or maybe you're on iTunes or Stitcher, we really appreciate you coming and checking us out. And those of you that were with us last year and you came back for year number 2, we salute you. We should probably have nicknames and medals for those people, don't you think? They were the OGs.
Yeah, we got to find some sort of appreciation dinner or something.
Oh, I don't know about that. We're going to put it on Brian's tab is what we're going to do. Money bags over there. We hope you'll tune in again next week. We'll always have the 515 Fantasy Football Show on the air / podcasted before Thursday night football games, so help you set your lineup and everything else. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show.